correct? You're on mute.
Mauricio, real quick, that was Jack Harris in Michigan. He needs you to resend him the Zoom link.
Okay, I'll send it now.
Thank you. Thank you. That's why I took it. I knew it was Jack. So.
So Terry, to start the conversation when she lets people in, do you want to just do a, we're going to be starting soon, so be ready kind of thing, and then we'll.
Yep, I will.
Okay, cool.
Okay, Diana, you got to cue me.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at the live. I'm looking at the live page and it's not live yet, so.
Okay.
And Dustin may actually see it before I do.
Okay.
We can go ahead and start letting people in, even though we're not live streaming yet, right?
Yep.
Okay, then we're going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going off mute, going on mute.
Well, we're getting ready to start in just a few minutes. So we'll hope everybody's getting ready and coming in from the waiting room. So Phil, what do you think? Are we in for an exciting day today?
We are, Terry. We are. We have so many great topics to discuss. We have an incredible keynote today, and I just look forward to the engagement back and forth with everybody that's going to be here. So I'm sure the chat will be flying. I'm sure everything will be going on, and it's an exciting day.
Well, I think you've got some fun things planned for us today, so I'm really excited about that as well. You're sort of our Las Vegas for today, Phil.
That's right. That's right. So everybody make sure you have your what we sent you, that little gift we sent you. Make sure you have them ready. But yeah, we're going to have some fun. We know that it's tough to break the day up with, a lot of great content and great information, but we're going to have a little fun as well.
Yeah, I know. I think everyone's really kind of getting Zoom fatigue, Phil. As much as I love it, it's kind of one of those things where, as I love to say, we're kind of getting tired of seeing ourselves in the box, right?
Yes, yes. It'll be interesting when this all, passes us by, what people are going to think back on all the time we spent on screen. But we got to learn a lot about people. We got to be in their living rooms. We got to be part of their lives, and it's been an interesting experience.
I would agree, Phil. There's a group of my friends and I that get together, and to some extent, we've actually gotten to know each other a little bit better.
Yeah.
By virtue of being, in this kind of a setting. You sort of just gotta, talk to folks, and you end up talking about things that you might not have thought you were going to talk about. So,
and having those little hitches in video and audio and all that, everybody's gotten used to all that great stuff.
For sure. So it has been a very interesting time for sure.
Sure has. I think we're there. I think we're at the time.
All right. Well, I am then gonna get started because I know that we have such an action-packed agenda for today, and I want to make sure that we have plenty of time. Okay. Well, hello and welcome to our annual Digital State Summit. I think everyone probably knows me, but just to introduce, my name is Terry Takai, and I'm the Vice President for the Center for Digital Government. And I'm your host today, along with Phil Bertolini, who is also a vice president at the center and my partner in crime. All right. Now, before I review the housekeeping notes with you, I want to make sure that you have your Center for Digital Government dice cup and dice and deck of cards. If you weren't able to accept our gift, make sure you grab a deck of cards and some dice so you can join in the fun. You'll be needing both of them, so be ready. All right, so let's get on to our virtual event. But as always, even though you guys are all Zoom experts, we've put some housekeeping notes on the event format and how you can participate. We've also put those into the chat. Now, you'll notice that you're all on mute right now. You will remain on mute until we get to the fireside chat with our keynote. Now, I don't really need to tell you this, but you have a couple of viewing options. In the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you can toggle between speaker view and gallery view. We recommend active speaker view for our keynote and our fireside chat, but then we want you to move to gallery view for the breakout sessions and the CIO roundtable. And we'll remind you again about that. Now, you can use the chat feature to communicate with each other. You know, one of the great things that's happened in these summits is we've had as much fun in the communication in the chat as the conversations, right, Phil, during the event. So if you need help, we have a CDG help desk, so you can also send a chat to that person. Now, for the questions in the Q&A portions, we'll actually ask you to use your raised hand function. Your raise hand icon should be on the menu along the bottom of the screen. You guys have all done this many, many times. Or you can click on the participants tab and you'll find it there. Let us know, if it doesn't work or if you don't see it. All right. And so again, we'll be reminding you when we go to gallery view. We'd love to see all your smiling faces. Remember, we're sort of trying to simulate when we're all together face to face. And so, we really want to be able to look at everybody and be able to see and put some body language together with the conversation. All right, well, let's get started then. I am so honored to have you all with us today, both our government and our private sector friends. I want to say thank you for everything you have done to ensure that your citizens received what they needed during the past year. Your tireless efforts to provide quality services to your citizens shows exactly what you are capable of. You and your team stepped up and made it all happen. And we know that many of you are deep into the process of everything from distributing vaccines and deciphering what is coming from the feds next. Amazing work. I also want to personally thank you for being part of our surveys, awards, events, and work groups, and helping us frame our best practices, publications, and papers. And I'm going to talk about our best practices paper as we get into the CIO roundtable. You've made it a priority to help us make government better, and we can't thank you enough. You did this all while tirelessly keeping your processes moving forward. So we're here again virtually, but we're hoping that we will see you in person at NASCIO in the fall. I know that that's a little bit up in the air right now with kind of what we're hearing on the news. We're tracking that very carefully, and I know all of you are. So today's discussion and tomorrow's discussion, though, isn't to go back and look at where we've been, but it's really to look forward and say, even with some of the challenges with the variant and still some uncertainty about going back to work, we really want to start planning for the future and talking about how we can take advantage of some of the challenges that we've been through to actually move us forward. So we have 2 days of fun discussions, really to work together across all of the states. We've got a great group of people here, both CIOs, deputies, individuals from your organizations and our technology partners. So before we jump into the agenda, I'm just going to turn it over to Phil to say a few words to help get us started. So over to you, Phil.
Terry, thank you, and welcome everyone. I'm watching everybody come up onto the screen here. It's great to see all of you, and I want to also give you my big congratulations on the work that you've done over this very tough time. And looking forward is so important with the future of what you need to do. So I'm honored to be with all of you. I'll be in some breakouts to work on some discussions with a bunch of CIOs and some of our partners. So I look forward to that, and I'll turn it back over to Terry. Terry, all yours.
Thanks, Phil. Well, let's get started. So today's agenda is going to begin with a special presentation on how strong leadership is necessary to make big dreams a reality. This session will focus on what it takes to be a leader at NASA. Renee Wynn, the former CIO of NASA, will share her experiences in getting things done in a very large federal entity. She's going to share stories and sage advice on what it takes. Following our opening session, we're going to break into work groups, and we asked each of you which work group that you would like to participate in. We selected those groups from the survey that you all filled out. Then we'll come back together at the end to do a CIO roundtable, and it's another chance to share ideas, issues, experiences, and to reflect on what we've heard from Renee and what you've heard from others. Now, we know everybody has been separated from your loved ones and friends. You all found ways to pass the time doing fun indoor activities like playing games. So as Phil said, in honor of playing games, to keep us all sane, we are going to use the dice cup and dice and deck of cards. We're going to play a fun game on both days before we close out. So we'll not want to miss that game. So without further ado, let's get started. But Amy, did you have a question before we kicked it off? Amy, you'll have to turn off your mute. And did you have a question before we get started? Nope. All right, Amy, I'll assume you were sort of trying out the raised hand button. All right. Well,
No,
again,
I don't. I mistakenly hit that. I do not.
Okay, Amy, well, great. At least now we know, you know where that button is for us going forward. All right. Well, again, as I mentioned, our keynote speaker for today is Renee Wynn, the former CIO for NASA. Renee is an accomplished leader in information technology and cybersecurity with extensive experience guiding government agencies through complex transformations. Organizations are reaching out to Renee to share her expertise in space, cybersecurity, leadership, women in STEM, global IT management, and supply chain risk management. Over 30 years of federal service, Renee was one of the longest serving CIOs at NASA. She managed a $2 billion information technology portfolio, serving 65,000 employees and contractors, and many of those in locations that she's going to talk about, that it's going to be really fun. And she established NASA's first ever IT strategic plan that aligned its space and aeronautic program goals. She co-led NASA's first transformation into a more centralized services model that improved overall quality, saved $50 million a year in software costs, and established a cybersecurity program that reduced risks across 150 metrics. And I know all of you out there in the state space have really met that challenge in really trying to drive to more centralized services. So it'll be great to hear Renee's comments on that. As CIO, she also served on NASA level governing boards that provided oversight in planning and evaluating missions, including satellite launches, Mars 2020, the James Webb Space Telescope, and Moon to Mars exploration programs. She's been recognized by Federal Computer Week with its President's Award in 2020 and its Fed 100 Award in 2019. And she was named to Washington Exec's 2019 Top 25 Executives to Watch list. Before joining NASA, she spent 25 years with the Environmental Protection Agency in various roles, including CIO, Deputy CIO, the Office of Solid Waste and Emergency Response, and the Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance. She's a strong advocate for social responsibility and serves on the board of the Women's Center, a Virginia and Washington, D.C. based nonprofit dedicated to improving the community's mental health and well-being through counseling, education, support, and advocacy. And we are so excited to have her with us today. So, Renee, turning it over to you.
Great, Terry. Thank you so much. Phil, thank you. It's great to be here and welcome everybody. I'm beginning to hardly recognize those words as the scars are starting to fade away after leading technology and actually a couple of agencies. So my hat's off to everybody that works in the IT business, where you know that the minute you come to work, you go ahead and just say, yes, I know I'm dumb, ugly, and stupid. And yes, it's going to get better from here, especially during a deployment when things don't go as planned. But, that's part of what we do, is plan for at NASA. Certainly we plan for the very challenging launches and develop things that have never been developed before. And it's okay if you make mistakes because you're learning along the way. So it's great to be here. And before I get started, what I'd like to do is introduce you introduce to you what NASA is planning to do, or has at this point already done in 2021. So let's go ahead and watch this video first. Great. Well, I hope you liked the introductory video. I think it does a really good job of setting the stage for some of the what I hope are nuggets that you can take away from today's discussion, as well as the rest of your conference while you're participating in whatever office you're participating in. I'm participating in my home office. You can see I've got a lot of space paraphernalia around me. I didn't start as a space geek, but certainly when you go to NASA and you get to know some amazing folks, you start to become very thrilled by space, and that I myself have no intention of leaving terra firma at all. I fly in airplanes, and that's probably going to be the closest I get to space myself. So in the video, what you saw right at the beginning was called the Space Launch System. In the orange rocket that you got to see, I got to crawl in one of those because all of us that work with IT, guess what? It operates with IT. And so she was open, the rocket was open at a time when I went down to a facility, and they used NASA's network at Michoud facility, which is outside of New Orleans. And so what we went is we were struggling with some of the network connectivity for the workers and for the businesses that were located in that facility. So we ran down and did some checks, walked the facility. It was a 1 million square foot warehouse, effectively built for World War II and airplane assembly. So you can imagine what it might look like if you went into a big warehouse built in the 40s. It might have been the late 30s in that, but you can imagine what it is. So we were dropping lines and taking a look at all of that. And you have to connect up modern technology in these older buildings. And so it's really quite a feat to see how they do everything. And water is not your friend. If you know anything about the New Orleans area, you know that it's flat and some of the areas below sea level. So water during major storms does become an issue, but the team there working in partnership do a really good job of fending off the water and prepare for those unintended consequences if the deluge is just more than the ground can handle. And as you know, working in IT or being a user of IT, you've got to be prepared for anything. Another thing that you saw in here was Perseverance and Ingenuity. Both are now on Mars. They landed in February, and they landed in February after a launch in 2020. And what you saw was the first helicopter on Mars. And that helicopter is kind of a pretty cool thing, because when we were making the governance decision and the boards were meeting, one of the things that was very clear was Mars Ingenuity rover was going to launch with or without that helicopter. The reason they have to make a tough decision like that is you got to get all your technology and everything lined up for launch. And the launch window for Mars only comes around every couple of years. And so the team did not want the rover to miss that launch window and have to sit another couple of years. And sitting and idling is really not what technology does very well. If you've been away for a while from your computer, let's just say maybe 2 weeks, and you launch that baby up, you're going to be waiting for a number of Patch Tuesdays to get processed, and you're going to reboot and reboot. You can imagine a complex vehicle like a rover Perseverance. It does get very challenging. So Ingenuity did make it. She's tucked in under her belly. A lot of things that land are influenced by origami. The James Webb Telescope, you see that yellow piece on the James Webb Telescope, that was in fact used origami. Sorry, let me just stop for a second. Origami influenced not only the shields, but also the sun shield as well. And it really does unfurl. There's a couple of great videos that show you how these shields sort of bloom outside of that. And the James Webb is now working towards a launch date after many delays and several $1 billion. But it is a space telescope. It is a one of a kind, and it's going to answer questions about the universe and show us things that we've never seen before, given its resolution. And that. So I want to go back to Perseverance and Ingenuity and let you know that AWS powers it. You've not seen that on a commercial. You're not really supposed to use NASA in your commercials, but perhaps you may have noticed a few uses of astronauts or space inferences in there. Next time you watch an AWS or a Microsoft commercial, they also support the space program. You'll see these inferences and you'll know that they actually get those inferences because they are serving NASA in a number of different capacities. Back to to Microsoft and Office 365. In September of 2019, NASA deployed Office 365 to the International Space Station. And we had spent 2019 rolling out Office 365, and it was quite fortuitous because when the calendar flipped and into 2020, beginning in January of 2020, NASA began tracking the pandemic. Our astronauts fly quite frequently back and forth to the International Space Station, as do astronauts from other countries. And there are quarantine periods for their health and the health of other astronauts already on space station. And so we had to evaluate whether our quarantine period needed to be revised associated with a pandemic. And that it was at the end of January where a bunch of us chiefs of engineer, and the heads of the agency, head of Human Exploration Office, Aeronautics, and the heads of the agencies themselves, the NASA administrator, et cetera, began to meet to plan how we were going to proceed preparing for and operating in the pandemic. And so I was grateful that we rolled out Office 365 in 2019, got it up to space station because it heavily relied upon it in 2020. And as we've spilled now into a very long period of 2021, it is definitely being used quite a bit and allowed. We had to do a few special things associated with my Office 365 at NASA than other agencies would have to deploy, and they all worked really beautifully. Well, we also might have seen some airplanes. So there's a lot going on in aeronautics. It's not just space at NASA. And in aeronautics, if you've flown recently, I have flown recently, took advantage of being vaccinated, and went a few places to see some things that I hadn't been able to do some things and see some people that I hadn't been able to do. And I think I made the window. So I'm not sure I'm going to be traveling again for a while unless it's in my car. But air flight, so you look out the airplane window and you see that the wings tip up, and that curving up is a sustainability. It saves gasoline. If there's less gasoline, there's less pollution out of the airplane, and it also helps it more efficient air flight. So we're excited about all the advancements that continue to happen in aeronautics. And now they're looking at vertical lift and they're looking at hypersonics. And that research is going really well. I'm expecting to see some announcements in 2022, some rollouts of some really good results of tests with hypersonics. One of the problems with hypersonics is the noise that gets created. And yes, it has happened where there has been damage to glass, windows, homes, buildings, and other structures from hypersonics. And we don't want to do that if we're just flying around for leisure or business travel. So they're working on getting it low boom and much quieter. And that research has been going really well based on what I've been able to read in the years since I've been out. And I share all of these stories and I can talk about all of these things, and I haven't gotten to Artemis yet, and I promise to get there, is because I participated in the governance meetings associated with that. I got to tell you, they're very fascinating. And when I first got to NASA, I didn't understand anything they were talking about. I came from an environmental policy background. I'm still a tree hugger. I understood about solid waste, I understood about clean air and clean water and safe chemicals and that. Next thing you know, I'm thrust into a place where we're talking about planetary protection. Well, I've worked in planetary protection, right? We want to reduce our waste, reduce our air pollution, our water. Oh, you're talking about if we go to the moon and we go to Mars, what does the United States potentially damage when it gets there? And then when it comes back, and I'm going to talk about something that's coming back, what happened when it returned? Oh, that's like a very different planetary protection than I'm accustomed to. And I would sit through these governance meetings, such as the planetary protection discussions, which NASA takes very, very seriously. And it was fascinating. It was like sitting in a graduate level course on a variety of different topics, from human to microbial, and what could happen, what's the plan, how do you contain it, who do you inform, what's your communication? Kind of like we've all experienced in the global pandemic that we are still in the middle of right now. And I would sit in there like I was observing a class, of course. Then it would come around and they'd say, hey, do you have any questions? And I would actually just confess that I was fascinated with discussion. I really learned a lot. And I said, from a cybersecurity and IT perspective, I suppose we'll have to make sure that if there are any aliens, they have two-factor authentication. And after that, I needed to bow out of the discussion and just take it all in and continue to learn and add value at a later discussion. So it was always fascinating at times at NASA to try to stay engaged from a level of being a decision maker at an iconic agency versus just the pure fascination of being part of turning science fiction into fact on a regular basis. So speaking of science fiction and fact, you'll saw in there an asteroid, and the name of that asteroid that was in there was Bennu. We have already gone to Bennu and landed a robot on Bennu, and then that robot scooped up, with some challenges and difficulties, samples of that asteroid. The door on the sampling machinery wasn't closing, but they did get a good sample, and that sample is on its way back to this planet. It will be the first time in the United States that an asteroid has come to the Earth while not burning, the asteroid itself not burning through the atmosphere. And so there's a lot of scientific questions to be asked. Japan has already undertaken a mission like that, and it was ahead of the United States schedule, and their sample, it's my understanding, will be back before the United States sample. So pretty soon there's going to be science about asteroids that we've never been able as humans to gather, because the asteroid burns through the atmosphere and thus takes away some scientific evidence that might tell you more about the asteroid itself. So I'm very excited about Bennu's sample returning, and that you can follow all of this on Twitter and other social media. NASA puts out a weekly video this week at NASA, which I love to watch as part of my learning at NASA, so I could start to get a sense of the mission purposes and the mission names, because there was a lot to keep track of. So it was great to be part of that one. And then I said that I would come back to the Artemis program. So the Artemis program is the twin to Apollo and is intended to put the first female boots on the moon, which I'm personally very excited about. And some of the astronauts that are training now may be those boots on the moon, and some of the women there are pretty fabulous. They're all, yes, you can always assume, yes, they're really smart, but they're all really down to earth, and they're really fun to talk to about different things. So how did I get involved with Artemis besides just being part of NASA's governing body? And that is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity in space is a fairly new field by cybersecurity terms. And well, there are a lot of challenges in space. And so we took a hard look at the Artemis program to ensure that we understood all the components of Artemis, both that which was brought, NASA would bring to the table, as well as the components being brought in by our partners, our international partners. And those partnerships are still forming now, as well as our business partners here in the United States, some of them that you've already heard about associated with it, the lunar landing, Leidos, Dynetics, SpaceX, Blue Origin, and the likes, and that. So we took a hard look at the cybersecurity, and we've built in a process to ensure that that mission, which is a huge program for the United States government, has protections built into it and regular checks. So if you add new components to it, that you make sure those components work like you want, and they go to your network, not somebody else's network, and give out data or open up a port that could cause a significant issue for the mission itself. Just as an example, the mobile launch unit, which you did see a picture of, but it was hard to tell that it was mobile. There were 400,000 sensors on that piece of equipment alone. So that just gives you a sense of what is on there. Also on that mobile launcher are cameras. Every launch is filmed because there could be an incident associated with that. They get played out in the public. You've heard of a few incidences lately. They'll pull the film from that camera, and that filming is done by the CIO organization. And those cameras are packed into fire, water resistant, heat resistant packages so that that film gets preserved. An example of film that came in handy was when there was a coupling at International Space Station, and it didn't go as planned, undocked to do a retry with that one. It was an autonomous attempt. And what we did is that was filmed by the CIO organization located at the Johnson Space Center. And so that film was pulled and given over to that engineers. It's not physically film anymore, but I'm giving you a sense of what happens. And it was pulled and the engineers reviewed that. And that happened on a lovely Saturday evening. I was en route to my birthday dinner. So this is like being on call at all times. And I'm happy not to be that way anymore. I'm on my way. They're letting me know, hey, we're going to authorize, you heard about what happened with Russia, with the coupling incident. I'm like, no, I hadn't. I'm in an Uber on my way to dinner right now, briefed me on it. So they brought me up to speed and said, hey, we're keeping the team on that's been on all day because they're the ones most familiar with the filming and all of that and would be most helpful to the engineers. So we kept them on, we paid the overtime. And, our IT people are very much part of the very cool missions that NASA does. And this happens on a regular basis. We are part of all of that, not just on the cybersecurity, but actually doing filming that helps our engineers take a look at our testing facilities. You'll see drop tests, that filming happens and things like that. We've got a boat, we've got drones, we've got really cool equipment that we buy, not on eBay, but we buy it as low a price as we possibly can get. Some of it is Department of Defense used equipment, but hey, we're happy to use it at NASA to film what's going on there. So those are some of the things that I got to do. And I've got to tell you that preparing for the pandemic was emotionally difficult because it's on top of your other work too. And if you're in ops, there isn't a day that you come in with a plan, then your plan of what you're going to do, and then plan meets first contact of reality, and that stuff goes to the side and you focus on our stuff. But I was most worried about my team. So we were already working some long days just because we had just finished and we were actually still rolling out Office 365, which requires extra cycles in your project plans. And so then we had to pivot very quickly to really think about things in a very different way. How are we going to provide safe IT support? Because your computer breaks the minute you walk out the door. So we established centers outside of our centers where you could come in and have safe places to come get your computer fixed if you needed that. We started shipping right away as well, which meant you had to pack the computers up. It meant there was going to be some downtime associated with somebody. So we had to think about personal devices and how we would allow those on our network, which make me very nervous, not because your personal device, but well, yes, your personal device, and are you keeping it updated? But the second thing is your home network. What do you have on your home network? Do you know it's on your home network? Are you monitoring your home network? Are you keeping logs for your home network so that I can go back and look at them? We, of course, know that the answer is pretty much no, 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 no to all of those questions. I myself, very careful about what I put on the network, but I don't keep the logs. If there's going to be an incident here, since I'm a big user of cloud services, I will just stop using that computer, have that computer destroyed, or maybe I'll have it looked at and I'll get myself a new piece of equipment. I do know it creates an electronic footprint problem, but having been a victim of identity theft, I don't want to do that again. So I'd rather go one way or another on that one. And so we shifted to allow on the home networks and how we're going to monitor that. You have to, privacy was a big deal. And I know, like you guys, the last mile of providing services, there's nothing I can do about it. I can do a lot about feeds into the buildings, but there's very little I can do about the last mile around homes, especially those in rural areas that really suffer from not having as good of access as those that live in urban or suburban environments and that. So there were a lot of boosters and hotspots mailed and so we just worked day and night to make sure that we could serve the mission. And in 2020, without a hitch, we did 3 historic launches, and that happened with a lot of remote work. My people were safe, as well as all of the other engineers and scientists working on those missions. The historical launches were 2 commercial crews. This was the first time ever where NASA bought as a service a ride from a private sector, bought a ride to the International Space Station, and that was the SpaceX launch. That you saw in that one. There were 2 of those. And of course, then we had the launch of the Mars 2020 rover Perseverance, and that took place in 2020 without a problem. And then she landed in February, and that went really well. And then we got the helicopter, and the helicopter just helicopter just posted on Twitter a shot of Perseverance a few hundred feet off of the rover. So it's kind of fun to look at what's going on Mars on a day-to-day basis, in that if you need a little bit of a break from your reality and that. And so as I conclude here, I think as I left NASA, one of the things that I definitely learned is everything is about risk, and weighing those risks and putting those against your business and mission needs, and figuring out how to mitigate those risks, or sometimes just we'll watch those risks and set a regular cadence to come back and take a look at those. And the other thing I learned a whole lot about was cyber supply chain risk management. So as an example, there are only a few places that make chips, and there are a few places that give the United States government pause for where those chips are made. But when you start a mission and your components are put together, it's really not a good idea to have one component provider and another component provider, because you could be introducing unnecessary risk into the mission itself. And so a chip got put on the better check, maybe not buy list. And so we met with the team, and they were fairly long along the process of finalizing their mission for launch. So it was very late in the game to be introducing new components. And so what we did is we examined the chip, and we talked to the team about how they were going to use the chip. And from there, we were able to make a risk-based decision to allow them to use that chip. So everything is about risk, taking a look at its use, the risk it provides, and figuring out how to mitigate the risk, watch the risk, or not accept that risk, which is pretty much your jobs on a day-to-day basis. So with this one, what I'd love to do is spend some time answering some of your questions, and maybe I can answer them. Maybe I can't, but I hope that I can answer most of your question. So with that, Terry, let me welcome you back and see what we can do together.
Well, great, Renee. Thank you so much for that conversation. And, I've already had a comment, in the chat about, your take on, those risk versus trade-off discussions. Did you have a framework that you used, or was there a data gathering approach that you used to really put some structure into that conversation of risk versus trade-off?
Yes, we did have a framework. And so there were actually several frameworks associated that you would use, because you first have the enterprise risk framework that you use, right? And once you get down into the programs and projects, you can get down to a little bit lower level. And the simplest way to put it, because we did have frameworks we use, is really a 5x5, the risk versus consequence. And you sort of map that out, and you put them on the chart, and you have your red, yellow, and green being closest to your XY axis, yellow being out there in the middle, and your red being that. So if you had a 5x5, you'd be in a red. If you had a 5x4, you'd still be in a red. If you had a 4x4, you actually might end up in the yellow versus the red. And so we would weigh, what do we think the risks are? 5x5, the matrix versus the consequence, and then, start to work the issue. On the product side, we had an excellent service that we used that looked at the time, 3 tiers. It is now shifted to 5 tiers, and is likely to go to 7 tiers of evaluation on those components: manufacturing, investment dollars, who owns the companies, parent companies, all sorts of geopolitical issues are looked at. And then we would look at that component. But then the last thing we do, just like the last chip that I did, is that chip didn't come up as being particularly inviting to use for the United States government. But we, in the end, made a risk-based decision because of the way they were going to use that chip and the strategies they were going to put in place. Then I felt safe. I felt okay signing the risk decision to say, yes, we can use this chip. So it starts big, and then you just work it all the way down to the component. And in this instance, we got all the way down to the chip.
Wow. Well, that's, signing off on a risk based decision on a chip is a pretty interesting leadership challenge.
Mhm.
Can you talk about what it was like to assume that kind of a leadership role at NASA? And was there any one point during your early days of coming into that role where you said, whoa, okay, now I get it, or all right, this is how I'm going to formulate sort of my plan going forward?
Yeah. Yeah. So I had a lot of help. I had great help. First of all, my team was fabulous. I inherited a great team when I got to NASA and so it was my job to like get the best from them and learn from them and support them in any way that I could. And that support includes challenging conversations, or as I got told, the look. Sometimes apparently I didn't need to have a conversation. I apparently had a look, which I don't know. My son says I have it. I don't know it because nobody's reflected it back saying that's the look that we don't ever want to see. But apparently I did. So yes, so one is rely on good people. And I had some great experts in terms of cybersecurity, mission association, whatever it was. And I would put at the table for some of these decisions because the chip decision was made with just a few number of people. I did not want that risk known publicly, what we were dealing with and how we were mitigating it. So I kept it fairly quiet, but put the right people in the room, including the mission leads, right? You know, we don't know how they're going to use it. So they have to tell us that. Then you sort of ask a bunch of questions and you go back and then you sign off on it, you know, based on that information and you document everything you do. But there was a pivotal moment at NASA, and it was also a very scary moment. I hadn't been at NASA long before they asked me to be the CIO there. I came on as the deputy and I was so excited to get out of the acting CIO chair. I was like, God, this is hard work. I'm going to go make someone be successful and help them in any way I can. That didn't last very long. After 3 months there, I was named the CIO, but I was asked at 2-week mark. And so we were just figuring out that transition. And I hadn't been NASA long. But then shortly after I got the job, the White House called and said, well, NASA's cybersecurity posture is in need of improvement, a lot of improvement. So they were meeting with Charlie Bolden, the administrator at the time, and kind of laid it out straight. Actually, both the men in the room, Charlie and a good friend of mine, Greg Tuhill, are former generals. One's Marine Corps, one's Air Force, so they know how to chat to each other. And they're chatting back and forth, very respectful manner. And then Charlie just looks at me. Now, mind you, I now have maybe been at NASA 6 months at this point of this conversation. He says, go make that happen. Improve our entire cybersecurity posture. Oh, okay. That would be the cybersecurity posture that is off the globe too, right? Yeah, all of it. That's all NASA. Right? We've got to go do. And so go do is what we did. Now, a lot of work had already been started. You know, NASA had the authorities to operate for their systems. They just asked in the chat, do we use the National Institute of Standards and Technology? Yes, we use their framework. The United States government, from the Department of Homeland Security Office of Management Budget, had matrix and a risk matrix that they wanted us to use. So we had everything in place. What we didn't have in place was momentum and the unwavering support from leadership. And I had unwavering support from leadership from Charlie Bolden to Jim Bridenstine and from the missions on down. And I started this by saying, yes, I understood I'm done, ugly, and stupid. But part of that is all of us need to enter into any leadership program, any leadership position with a high level of humility. I needed to learn as much as I needed to go do. And so I would learn how things operated, and my team, their technical capabilities would then work with the missions to start figuring it out. And I'm happy to report that in my tenure there, we went from a rating of high risk to managing risk overall grade. But the categories themselves, there are now 4 categories. We still had one with a high risk in it, but we had better grades on the other one. We all remember grading, right? If you aren't doing so well, you better get A's the rest of the way in order to have a B at the end of the semester, right? Well, that's what we did, is we focused where we could really get some things done. And I got a text message really about 6 weeks ago from one of my former colleagues thanking me for what he had done to lead the way, because NASA in all of those categories, mission and mission support mission, now all hit managing risk across NASA. And that includes our flying assets. And some of those we can't do anything about, because you know what? You're not going to bring a satellite back from 12 million miles away, give it a new operating system on Patch Tuesday, and send it back out there. So we come up with different ways to mitigate the risk.
Well, that's fantastic. There's another question out here, Renee, about the challenges of hiring and retaining technology professionals. Sometimes when you have something like a NASA, where there's just a real interest in it, it can really hit you a couple. And then, of course, thinking about federal contractors, which, of course, I had some experience with at DoD. So did you find that people wanted to come to NASA and it was easier to hire? Did you see that there was a brain drain and then you had to go back and rehire? Everyone here, all the CIOs are really challenged with attracting individuals to come into government. So what was your experience with that?
We experienced a little of it, probably not like other agencies, because a lot of people on their first day when they'd be hired, and I'd meet with anybody that was hired into my organization, a meet and greet with them, when it would work schedule wise, they were just thrilled to be working for NASA. So let's put the arrogance aside and let's talk about succession planning and recruiting and retention, right? So retention is a challenge in IT fields because of the pay that you can command on the outside. And there are benefits that states and federal government offer that you can't get on the outside. And I think it's really important for you to play to your strength. And that, I think, at times there's decent balance between personal life and professional life. Maybe not as the NASA CIO, but I was at a different place. My son was already an adult at that point. I guess the term is off payroll. He had his, he was creating his own payroll, and so on that one, I knew, when I stepped in the position, I wasn't going to see the balance that perhaps we all like, but I knew also too, I was nearing the end of my tenure in the federal government, so that wasn't an issue. I would say the biggest thing that NASA does, and the biggest thing that anybody can do, is have internship programs, and some of them ours are paid, and some of them aren't, and giving people meaningful, dignified work as an intern, not paid, has them loyal. And most come back even for a little bit of their early career, or may come back at a later career side. So use your internship programs to be an element of your of your potential hires in the future. We do a lot of different things. In fact, one of the guys that worked for me at NASA was really good at having interns come in and do some amazing stuff. It's the stuff you really want to get to, but because ops eats you every day, you don't get to. So internship programs, recruit outside where you think you need to, right? LinkedIn is a great spot. I went to dice.com. I used Women in Technology. Use those places. Because that's where some people don't get recruited from, and you get to be the person that comes there, and you'll get a lot of loyalty and a lot of feeling of gratefulness from your employees when you go to where they are and you can find them. Your organization, right, is another place where, ask another person, someone's moving from one state to another, transfer them from one state CIO office to another one. Look out for your people, and they will tell others to come work for you. That doesn't get you all the way. Just those are some of the strategies that get you part of the way.
Renee, did you find, following on to that question, that you had folks that may have come on as an intern and then gone off to another career and then came back to NASA?
There was some of that I heard about, obviously not when I was there because I wasn't there, maybe when they were an intern. But yeah, we do have people come back after years of going off to do something both in the mission and in the mission support side. Yeah, you do see that. And because life's change, right? If I were, I'm facing probably parent care, not now, right? Everyone's really healthy, but father's 84. And so you face that. And I'm thinking, where would I need to be to do parent care? Well, there are a lot of places I could be, and there's a lot of places I probably wouldn't be in order to do that. And so the government in the feds, we do provide a little bit more of that flexibility, especially now with all the remote work. And NASA was always open to remote work. You know, our astronauts are working remotely 200 plus miles off the face of the earth, and they're doing a lot of different things, but it's remote. And so we're very open to that remote work. And that really kind of allowed people to think about their life and balance what they were needing at that point and coming back into federal service. And quite possibly, you know, I don't know much about the state government, but I would say the state government offers that too.
Yeah. Well, Renee, let me shift gears a little bit and, talk a little bit about two areas of funding. The first one being that I think as you showed us in the video, NASA is certainly about more than going to space. You showed a lot of examples of aircraft and, of that ability to try some different things and create and bring new technologies in. But, with all of that, I think there's always sort of a group that says, we only have so much money in government. What is the value of funding NASA to the billions of dollars a year? What does that do for the average citizen so that they can understand why that money should be spent on going to space?
Yeah, Terry, that's a great question. And I really appreciate you asking me that one. So let's begin in the medical field. All right, so telemedicine has been going on as long as there's International Space Station. And so we've been able to pass off some of our technology, some of what we've learned to help with telemedicine and privacy. Uplinks and downlinks, you still have to make sure they get where they're supposed to go, back and forth from that. Another thing in the medical, a lot of metals and composites are designed in support of space travel. Some of them don't get used, but those components can go on to other uses. Just preparing for this speech, I just noticed a new posting. So in hip replacements, the composites that were invented and advanced in their invention, that is going to technology readiness levels higher and higher and making sure the capability will actually work as intended. That was done through research grants by NASA for the benefit of space travel, even though this technology also ended up in the joints on the hip replacements. And so those are made from composites developed in support of space program and used now in the medical field. There's how about in your home, just ordinary things, wash your clothes? I do. And one of the things, so physics of liquids. Physics of liquids can be challenging to study in a gravity environment because the liquids are compressed by the gravity themselves. Their physical attributes are different. You send them up in space, and we've seen it. If you haven't, Google, watch some YouTube videos of being in space, and you'll see the liquid globule is kind of floating around and kind of moving a little bit. Well, that ability of the liquids to take on that form allows the study of them, the physics study of them, to be very beneficial. And what has happened there, and this is an environmental sustainability story, is that P&G was able to study the physics of liquids in space and redesign Tide so that it used less water, again, physics liquid, and by using less water, you're using less resources, and they were able to shrink their packaging associated with it. So now fewer plastics are being needed and still delivering the cleaning capability to the public that buys their products. That research goes on to benefit, and that's an environmental one. One of my favorite stories is cooling units. So spacesuits are hot. I've never put one on, but I've watched somebody get into the last piece of it. Oh my gosh, I'm like, oh my God, I'd be like, get me out, I'm done, right? But no, not Peggy Whitson. Put that baby on and let me ride. And so one of the things is the cooling in that suits and lots of advancements in the cooling technology. Cooling technology here, besides keeping your water cold in your Camelback, yes, that is how it's used, cryogenics and that, but also to cooling suits. In Childbirth is still very dangerous, both for the mother and the child. Cooling suits can be used in high-risk birth environments in developing nations to bring the body temperature down and therefore increase the chance of survival if it is a particularly difficult birth, either for the mother or for the child. So cooling suits have a lot of medical uses associated with them. They're using on the football field. I know they've been doing research on icing down the body after a hit that could have had spinal cord damage. Again, the cooling processes associated with that. And so looking at how the human body looks at cooling, is again, when we do cooling suits, the technology is used in birthing, but you get lots of tertiary uses of the scientific data can go on to be used for different things, such as Camelback, some of the bottles that keep the water cold or hot, depending on which way you want to go. That technology was used and flourished because of some NASA grants associated with it. So those are just some of the examples. There's spinoff.nasa.gov. And there's one that's in your home, and I can't remember what the website is. Sorry about that. You can go look and see how your everyday lives are impacted by research that is done for the advancement of space and aeronautics.
So let me go to your specific budget, Renee. Any challenges with getting approval? I think everybody has this challenge of how do we put together the story around why the money should be spent on information technology when there's technology everywhere at NASA.
Mm-hmm.
So, how did you frame, your request? And then, did you ever have challenges even from Congress in terms of what you wanted to spend from an information technology and cybersecurity perspective at NASA?
So having a reputation that we had in cybersecurity, I was, I guess, at a fortuitous time that the Hill was very supportive of NASA's requests in IT and in cybersecurity. So I'm going to focus on what happens inside the agency. So my budget was up for grabs for everybody else, just like your budgets, right? You have a plan, and then you have actual, and then you have actual again in that one, because things come along and change. One of the things I started doing with the help of my great deputy, Jeff Seaton, who is now the CIO at NASA, is I really asked him to take a hard look at the programs we were running and said, we need to understand precisely what they are spending, because I can't go ask for money if I am in fact doing redundant spending or redundant spending on stuff without a purpose. So over about 2 to 3 budget cycles, which is really 2 to 3 years, he really led the effort to get down to understanding our compute program, which is global infrastructure and off the globe infrastructure. Look at our bigger programs, end user support. Right, with 65, we provided services to about 35,000 people when I left on end user. That is growing, which is great. With that, those were our big budgets plus applications that we ran for the agency, and we got it down. It took a while in the cycles to truly understand what they were doing, and then we could start doing license sharing. We could start asking the tough questions of, really, do you need it? This isn't about you. This is about how you spend taxpayer money. You get a lot of emotions when it comes to money on that one. And that's a journey. You need to be as responsible towards your budget when you go forward to ask. That was a process. We would go forward and ask, like the Artemis program, we were going to have to expand our processes and our capabilities in ways I wasn't funded for. So we would put forward budget requests and try to justify them with what you get out of it. And right, if your infrastructure isn't operating, no one's getting data. And a squirrel takes out something every once in a while in your tenure. That's a good proof of, oh, the squirrel took out the data center. And honestly, that happened to me a couple of times. I know a couple of times, but yes, it did happen. And you can show people, try living without your IT for a while. So the pandemic and moving remote also, I think, helped Jeff in the long run for people to understand the importance of IT. But you got to tell them why, not just, and the why isn't because I need this cool toy, but here's how it could impact you. And if you can do some offset savings, if you shift tools that have greater capability, then I'll spend less over here, then be prepared to give that money up. And that it's always a balancing act. You got to be a good storyteller, and you got to be prepared to hear no, and then maybe whine about it after a while too.
Well, Renee, I'd like you to meet J.R. Sloan, who's the Chief Information Officer in Arizona. So JR, if you want to unmute yourself and then ask your question.
Hi, Renee. Thanks for coming and speaking with us today. And it's been just a great pleasure to hear you share your story and just your experience with us. So thank you for that. I want to kind of launch off of, you talked about the internship program. I love that. We're having some good success with internship. We focused it maybe more in an area around cybersecurity, which is one of the greater areas of challenge to find and retain people. But I wanted to ask you about what strategies you've deployed to nurture the culture and engagement with your employees throughout this remote work environment.
Oh, JR, I am so glad you asked this question because we all have this question, whether you're in IT or in any organization. So for the months that I was on board, one of the things I did is I ended my tenure with 22 direct reports. Do not go down that path. We were getting ready for a big organizational change. And so it was one of those collection, and go, okay, now we need to go a different direction with our organization. And so that's what Jeff really worked on after I left. One of the things they did is I'd reach out to my direct reports on a regular basis. So your days got longer, my days got longer too. I would check on them. And we had stand-ups every day because we had all sorts of different issues and we needed to work them fast. So, we just needed to all be on, do the stand-up, and then get going on what we needed to do. I would use occasionally those stand-ups just to do a check-in. Now your extroverts are going to talk a lot more than your introverts, but I would call on people and do a check-in. This was also good for strengthening the team because we all make each other evil sometimes in our own mind when we don't see them or they rubbed us the wrong way, or maybe we're just cranky, or maybe all of those things are happening, or maybe they really did something stupid and mean to you. And so we needed that from a team building. So I looked at it from an individual basis and asked them how they were doing with individual calls or texts. Great texter here. And then the other thing is really formulate that team by making some of those stand-ups, a check-in with the team. How are you doing on it? Make sure that you bring up the tough issues, and being able to bring up those tough issues took years to get to because nobody's got a problem at your first meeting. Nope, none whatsoever. And I'm going, yeah, funny. I'm looking at the tickets and I think we've got problems. I don't know. I'm just imagining it. And so I'd also pre-COVID, and this is a benefit for post-COVID, is I got my team together. We'd have 3 to 4 meetings physically together per year. One of those meetings was dedicated to team building and their leadership development. And I think it helped that you broke down those geographical barriers, because my team was all over the United States, broke down the geographical barriers, which then made it easier in a remote environment. I know that's hard to do that now. You could have the happy hours, you could have, little things to get people together and not talk about business, but really talk about each other. It's hard.
I think that I'll say we've seen the same thing, which is for those where we had good culture established going into the pandemic, like that is somewhat self-sustaining. But as we bring new people into the organization, it's like, how do we get that assimilation? How do we benefit from what they bring into the organization? Have you done anything in particular? Because you talk about the challenges we have. We can't get together. We can't do some of those team building things. So what are you doing to help incorporate new talent that comes in, be able to have the organization benefit from them, as well as have them also, both adopt and enhance the culture?
Yeah. So each of my direct reports towards the end of my tenure, because I finally got to that, right? That cybersecurity thing was just all I did because I had to learn too. So towards the end of my tenure, probably the last 18 months, this is where each of my direct reports I put in their performance agreement, specific actions to take towards those cultures. And when we switched out, that action needs to continue, even though you can't walk by someone's desk or you can still have lunch with them. I mean, you still have coffee with them. You're just not buying it for them. I guess you could buy it, just send them a Starbucks card or something like that. So I put it in their plans that they had to work on their culture. And that didn't come out in my tenure because that's your most important thing. So the team, I understand, I did have a year cooling off period, so there's a lot of things I couldn't ask, but I did understand that Jeff kept a lot of those things going and did some enhancements to it by asking people what's working, what's not working, and sharing those stories. And so your team can share those things. So you have your team, your direct reports talk about what's working, what's not working. And to me, you have to put it in their performance plan.
Thank you.
Well, thanks.
Oh, and then
Renee.
measure it. Don't just put it there, measure it.
Well, that's a great point. It has to be in the objectives and it has to be measured. Well, I've got one really quick question at the end that I think everyone's going to be interested in. Many of us have either driven an electric vehicle or used a particular service or flown on a plane. How does NASA view the private citizens that are now capacitizing themselves, if you will, to go into space? Is that a good thing or is that a dangerous thing?
Well, one, space flight anytime is dangerous. There are all sorts of risks, right? You have how many thousands of pounds of thrust on that engine, and you're sitting on top of it, not next to it, you're on top of that thing. So the danger doesn't go away no matter who funds it. So one is, so commercial crew is advancing, which is making space, low Earth orbit, much more commercialized. And that is a big benefit to humanity. And I'm a big believer of that. Space pursues science and the research and technology. We talked about composite materials. That is a great thing. You don't imagine these things without thinking about what could happen or what you might need that doesn't exist, and then you go invent that. All great rewards from space travel. For tourism, for the wealthy, I'll just put it that way, right? I don't think my entire retirement plan could buy me a seat on anything right now. The pure tourism, I think, will have some benefits. And to me, it's got everything has a bright side and a dark side. The bright side is it is showing people what's possible, and you see the Earth in a different way, and not just what the government provides to you as a view of the Earth, but these are Bezos and Branson saying, this is what I did, this is my picture. So if you don't believe the government, maybe you'll believe them. I'd like to see on those more science in the tourism side. And they may have done science, it just wasn't in what I read or wasn't advertised as much as NASA and others, when they do launches, really talk about the science that's on board, the theories that they want to prove or disprove associated with that. So if they add some science to it, hats off to them, because we should always be thinking about how we can benefit our community, whether our community is this big or the entire globe. The other downside, besides the risk of launch, is associated with debris. Space debris is a growing problem for every country that has assets in space, and so is cybersecurity. It's significantly on the increase in terms of the capabilities of what can be done for nefarious reasons. And so space debris, I think we've got to really figure out how we're going to manage that space debris, how we could turn it into something maybe more economically viable, like we've done here on Earth. We've got to look at space debris, as many people are, and really think about it. We also have a struggle tracking all of that debris, and so we need to get better at tracking that debris. Just in the first few months of 2020, where I was still at NASA, and then a little bit when I was off, the International Space Station had to do several maneuvers associated with avoiding space debris that was coming into the safety zone. So remember, we've got humans up there now, and we don't want an international incident, and space debris is incredibly dangerous to flying assets such as space station. And so there's opportunities in figuring out how better to manage and maybe get rid of space debris. But we do need to be conscious that what we are doing here on this planet, we are doing in space as well, because any mission that stops going, some do burn up and return, others of it just stay out there. So there's lots of risk and reward with this one. I'd like to make sure that anytime you go in space, it's about science and advancing technology and your community. If they're doing that, then I'm all for it. If not, then that's a suggestion of how they can make tourism, space travel better.
Well, Renee, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your insights, not just about NASA, but clearly about leadership, as well as some of the current events that are out there. Now, all right, everybody. Now we're going to give everybody a short break before we open the breakout rooms. So you can stretch, refresh whatever is in your mug, but please be back in 5 minutes. Now,
Great.
the other thing is, please stay logged in. That way, if you do get delayed when you come back, you'll already be transitioned into your breakout room when you return. All right. Well, then it's time for our breakout sessions. Now, everyone's been assigned to a breakout session, again, based on your preferences. Some of you will remain in this general session and be in the breakout with me. The rest of you will automatically be moved into your assigned breakout rooms. We have 3 exciting sessions: managing the C-suite leadership priorities for the future, modernization of infrastructure.
Can you hear me?
Applications, and then
Yeah.
digital government experience. All right.
Hi, Steve Towns.
Well, hey, how are you?
Steve Towns has a
Okay.
background, Alan.
Hey, I told you I would get things together over here.
I knew you would.
We're just in time.
We had no doubt in my mind you were going to get here.
Well, thank you, Phil. Thanks for sending me the background.
Yeah. Terry, that was a great talk with you and Renee.
Yeah,
Really
that
enjoyed
was
that.
super cool.
It was fun.
Well done.
Yeah, she's great. And,
Yeah, she's really engaging.
a lot of fun. But I had to ask her the question about, sort of personal space flight.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, that was a good way to tie it all together at the end.
Yeah, her answer was interesting too. I wonder, I don't know. I never quite considered that angle of it. I just figured, well, it's a tourist industry.
The whole mission of science to be tied
Yeah,
in.
how do they mix that in?
That was cool.
I like astronauts as the ultimate remote workers.
Yeah.
It's like we've been working remote for years.
Right. Okay. Are all my moderators ready for the breakout groups?
We're not only ready, we're fired up.
Yeah,
Good. My moderator
Phil-
team. All right.
Phil nailed it.
I'm not at all prepared, Terry.
Oh, so the live things today?
There's always one. There's always one.
Like moderated session. What's
Yeah,
that?
what?
What's that?
I'm
Yeah, you
really
guys
looking
just-
forward to listening in, Terry. Thank you for
No, what's the deal with this?
Yeah, you guys thought you didn't think you'd have to work for this, huh?
I was just
Exactly.
here to watch the NASA video.
As one of my favorite characters from the Tim Allen movie Galaxy Quest said, I'm just happy to be on the show. I think that was crewman number 6.
Yeah, right.
Oh, gosh.
What was the old thing on, what was it, Star Trek? If they were wearing a red shirt, they were likely to die. during the-
Yeah. There's always those 2 guys you never saw before.
Yeah, you never saw him again either.
Nope, never
Yeah.
saw him again.
Uh, Well, I do have to say, I'm glad I wasn't Renee to have to worry about cybersecurity in space.
I know.
Yeah,
I mean, it
Not
was
really.
enough of a challenge to try to
Yeah.
think of it from a DoD context. I mean, I just can't even imagine.
Terry, I'm glad to not have to worry about it for a state. So,
Yeah, true.
Right.
Lucky you, lucky you.
yeah.
that is so true, Tony. So true. We publishers, journalists, and researchers just going to look and advise and comment. We have an easy job.
So Alan and Steve, I didn't get to your intros before we went to the break, so you can kind of do a little bit of an intro of yourself once we get to the breakout sessions.
Okay.
So just didn't quite get there and wanted to give everybody a full break, so.
Way we
Another
can, me and Alan
5
can make up
minutes.
super
Yeah.
impressive title.
Yeah.
as far
Whatever
as-
title you want, Steve. It's
I
all
know,
yours.
this is wide open. This is an opportunity.
So, Mike, Tony, Greg, James, I see you there. Great to have you here today. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for inviting.
All right. Well, I think we're going to breakouts, right, Diana?
I'm ready whenever you are.
Go.
All right. I think we got everybody coming back, so let's do it.
Outstanding. Can everybody hear me on this end? This is Tony,
Yep.
State of New
Yep, I
York.
can, Tony.
All right, great. Terry asked me to open up this breakout session that talks about C-suite leadership, and I'm honored. Thank you so much, Terry. And you probably know more than anybody else. This is my second time around in the hopper after spending 30 years in the military as a senior leader. So leadership is one of the things that I always talk about. I've always been somewhat methodical in my approach to leadership. I was a second lieutenant in 1981 and a colonel as a retiree in 2014, and then a CIO in the Virgin Islands, a real small place. And then I go to this giant place in New York with a million things going on, 42 plus agencies, 3,400 employees, and 19 million citizens to support, and an infrastructure that's out of this world. I had to be methodical in leadership, and I've always tried to adhere to a tenet that speaks to those things that are important from a leadership perspective. And over the years, I've made the most important 4 Ps: people, processes, and IT products or technology, and also policy. Now, I developed that in many machinations. Of course, in the military, you don't talk about technology or anything like that. You talk about war fighting. But narrowing these down to 4 has given me an opportunity, like I said, to be methodical. The first thing I did in arriving in this organization is work the people aspect. As you know, and you've all heard it on television, we got a lot going on in New York, on the infrastructure side and on the people side. I was dedicated to making sure that people were my priority, making sure that we reduce the chaos, reduce the noise so people could communicate with one another, and make the customer our priority. In IT in New York, we have 2 customers. We have the customers that we serve, that we provide services to internally, and we have the outward-facing customers who get the services from the customers that we support. I wanted to make sure that we understood our priority in terms of taking care of the customer. I don't subscribe to the customer's always right. However, I subscribe to the treat the customer fairly and make them a priority approach to everything you do. We've worked some things out. Now, I've been here for 9 months now. Now I'm in the process phase, the process, understanding that we have to tweak our processes. We got a lot going on. If you could see my desktop right now, you could appreciate how many things. I have 4 computer screens going on. Cybersecurity is always an issue. We have a new state of the state address that we have to work on. You know, we have some new leadership. So we're reacting, and I've always liked to be a reactor. So with regards to C-suite leadership, I always encourage people to have some tenets that you work with. Be consistent, be fair, and always size up your customer. Understanding that they should be a priority. Not that they're always right, but you got to make them right. You got to provide to them the products and services that they need, not necessarily with a smile, but on time and efficient. And nowadays, it's got to be as safe as you can possibly make it. Be a deliverer as a CIO. And with that, Terry, I'm going to hand it over to you and let's start.
Great. Well, Tony, thanks a lot. Well, let me just remind everybody, turn on your cameras. Because again, this is our opportunity to really have some, great conversation across the entire group. So I'll get everybody to turn their cameras on and so we can see everyone. So thanks, Tony, for opening up. I really very much appreciate it. I have a question into the group. So really want to talk about how you guys are seeing the CIO role change, particularly as a result of, one of the good things, and of course, many of you have known me for a long time, and I've been doing this for a long time. And I've seen the CIOs really emerge from being kind of back room. And some of that's been in, I think, the attitudes of the CIOs as much as the way other people have seen the CIOs. And what I'm seeing is sort of a new respect for all of you, a new appreciation for what you've done and what you can do. But that's sort of my perspective, looking at things from the outside in. So let me just ask, for some input from the group, not only from the CIOs and the deputies that I have here, but also from the private sector folks. What are you seeing in terms of the way that CIOs are stepping up or the way that, they're being viewed? So who's next up? You want me to call on somebody? Oh, man. All right, I will. Then Jennifer, you're the next one up. What do you think?
Hey, good to see you. Yeah, I'll just say, I think in some ways, so my experience over this last year, one thing I think that the security issues, unfortunately, have been part of a little bit of the shift too, right? Like in some ways, like I'm able to really directly lead and make some very direct decisions or directives that, I think we all know, probably working with other agencies, even though we're managing IT, there's often a lot of pushback about certain things we want to do to either standardize or to implement certain policies. And in this case, in the landscape, I'm able to just say, this is what we're doing. It might be painful, but this is the world we live in. And so we will be very transparent. We will communicate with you. We will work with you as best we can, but it's just not an option anymore for some things. And so I've gotten very, very little pushback across the board on those type of things, because I think everyone recognizes okay, please keep us safe. Fine. Well, I'm not, they might ask some more questions, or, sometimes as we're rolling things out, there may be more specific pain points that we have to work through, but not getting pushback in that arena. And same thing, then that starts to translate to some of the other things we're doing a little bit more broadly. And I think for me, I just keep trying to communicate transparency and really admit to when we're not perfect. We know we're not perfect. We got lots of pain points. I just subscribe to the philosophy of just admit that up front. I'm not going to pretend we're perfect. But to give them, the other, agency leaders that I work with, sort of, here's the vision, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it. And to just be really upfront about, and these things won't be perfect, or this might be a little bit painful, but this is why it has to happen. So it's been, again, it's not perfect, but I think in that respect, they're definitely letting us lead from that standpoint.
Well, thanks, Jennifer. Well, Michael, let me turn to you. What are you seeing? I know you talk to a lot of folks in a lot of states. So let me just ask you, what are you seeing? Are you seeing something similar to what Jennifer and Tony are talking about, or are you seeing some different trends?
I think there are several things. This is a classic case of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And the principal virtues that have served us well here are patience and humility. As Jennifer said, there is so much fear about security that as we have explained to people that turning it over to us means we're the ones who get in trouble when bad things happen has been a great motivator. In terms of other areas, I think, as you've said, we have garnered a lot more respect. And when I arrived, 4.5 years ago, everything was IT's fault. And today that is not the first thing people jump to terribly often, because we've been able to demonstrate that we are indeed looking out for their best interests and attempting to find ways to make it easier for them to meet their programmatic and business goals and combine their subject matter expertise with our ability to create tools. So I think it has been very positive, but culturally, bureaucracies are very risk averse and very slow to change. And I think what is probably going to be most important going forward is making certain that from administration to administration, there is some continuity of the consolidation and standardization goals, so they don't reinvent the wheel. And we're already working on that, even though we don't know who will be the next governor or who will be advising them, but getting the folks in the trenches to buy into why various programmatic themes are worth continuing.
Well, that's great, Mike. I appreciate that. That is a challenge year over year in terms of how you make sure that you can continue that. And I want to come back to that. But let me just ask, Michael Iswolda, what are you seeing out there? And are the CIOs taking advantage of the visibility that Mike Leahy's talking about? And are they looking and maybe venturing into some different areas than what they've done before?
Terry, thanks. I appreciate the outreach. As a former CIO in local government for all those years, being now part of the partner side and a pandemic and the things that happened, that on time, that trust has changed as technology being an essential service during this time. That's not something that, we used to get the blame person group entity where we were on the menu and it was our fault. And now I really see it changed. We're being engaged that CIOs are now at the table to find ways, as you said, to make it easier to do business with our constituents, but being a part of the strategic plan, which was something that they called in IT later, and they had to try to fix it and not engage from the beginning. So, with stimulus funding and cloud adoption and security, professional development is big, and training our workforce and investing in employees, it's a shift. And it's sort of like the custodians. They know where all the people are and what goes on. It's like IT. We know where everything is in the organization because they need us. So I see it shifting. They're engaging partners more, where I used to chase out partners and say I wouldn't have time. Now they're taking calls and engaging, which is a great trend because it's a partnership.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Now, remember, this is not me calling on you guys, right? I want some lively conversation here, not just me doing a QA, but I'm going to continue doing it. So if you've got a comment, please unmute yourself and join in. Well, Sean, I want to go to you next because actually you are in an interesting position. First of all, welcome to the CIO group.
Thank you.
But you're kind of in an interesting position because at the Georgia Technology Authority, your whole role is structured so that you cross administrations in many ways. So let me just ask, I mean, how are you finding your new role? And then have you had even a chance to think about, how being able to look at this over a 6-year period is actually going to maybe shape some of the decisions that you're going to make?
Well, I'm still drinking from a fire hose. I've only been here since July 1. Over a 6-year period, I am trying to get through this 6-month period here. Let's see. With what we have going on in Georgia here, we've got this broadband piece that's really taken over the focus for GTA. Right now, we're trying to get that into play, trying to get all the unserved areas and served areas with connectivity. With this infrastructure bill coming down the pipe, it's been approved through the Senate. We're hoping to get more money on that, but still, like I said, still drinking from a fire hose. I come from the policy side versus the technology side, so it's totally different here in Georgia right now. Cybersecurity is big on the list. We're trying to make sure we have visibility into all the agencies that we're serving. But my biggest thing here at GTA, I was listening to someone earlier, here in Georgia, everything is IT's fault. So we're trying to make sure that, I'm trying to make sure that whatever's happening, we know what's happening and we're ready and able to help fix it, So that's the biggest thing here in Georgia. So again, I'm new here, I'm learning from you guys, and I'm super excited to meet all of you.
Well, great. Well, welcome to the community. All right. Well, Greg, I'm going to go to you next, and then to Heman, and then to Mike Leahy. Greg, and know your background isn't backward. You're all set.
I can never tell. It's backwards for me. And with Zoom, we use Teams mainly. And so Zoom, I'm never quite sure. So for Indiana, Tracy Barnes is our CIO, and he started March 17th of 2020. Which was the day before we sent all employees home. But he negotiated to get the office of the CIO back into the cabinet, which was really helpful for us. So during the entire pandemic, they really did rely on him and the Office of Technology to really help respond to things, especially the Department of Health taking the lead on things. And I'll modestly say we nailed our remote work stuff. So that bought us a lot of cachet and credits with the agency or with agencies and with the governor's office. So we did our quarterly business review with the governor's office, which involves meeting with the chief of staff, all of the policy directors, state budget agency, and they generally grill you over the last quarter performance. For us, it turned into, you're doing great. Here's 5 things that we asked for that they said, sure, go ahead and do that and just let us know how it goes. And so I think for that really has bought us a lot of power and the ability to get ahead of things. Like, for example, we asked about RFPs. So the agencies that are issuing those are technology stuff. We eventually do see those, but we're certainly lower in the signature process. They allowed us to add 5 questions up front on the development of the RFP side before they even get approved. That lets us really see more things before they get down to line, where agencies have already, now we see agencies already picking a solution and then saying, you need to go do this. We can get ahead of that and make it work for our environment, but still meet all of their business needs. So the pandemic has been good for us in that sense.
Well, that's great. That's great, Greg. Heman, let me go to you next. What are you seeing with your customers?
Yeah, hi. So my name is Hemant Krishna. Just as a quick intro, I'm with McAfee. And so McAfee is, as you all know, it's evolved into this leading cybersecurity company. So what I am seeing, Terry, in the market today is there is a very huge demand for robust cybersecurity solutions. And what primarily state and local government agencies are looking for is something that is proactive rather than being in a reactive mode. So, like there are so many different types of cybersecurity attacks that are happening in today's world. You know, you name it, like ransomware, and there have been so many just in the past few months. So there is a pretty robust demand for finding a solution in the market that actually can help you prevent and stop these attacks from happening before they occur. And not trying to, sell something here, but McAfee has come up with a solution that actually helps you identify these attacks even before they happen proactively. They send you alerts and they can actually track these bad guys down before they are able to actually launch the attack. So I am seeing, and there are so many cybersecurity companies out there. Microsoft is everywhere, and we are trying to differentiate ourselves from some of our competition by modifying our solutions in a way that can actually help customers proactively rather than after the attack has happened. That is the trend I'm seeing today.
Appreciate that. Yeah, well, thanks for your comments. Appreciate that. Mike, do you want to come back in and weigh in on the leadership question?
Yeah, a little bit. Very quickly for Shanzia, I am still drinking from a fire hose 4 years in and loving it. But what makes that really worthwhile is you will be amazed at how supportive your colleagues in this group are. And, I invite you whenever you'd like to call on me or any of my folks. And I'm sure you will be hearing the same from others. And just to give you an example of that real quick, Greg, some of the things you're talking about right now about how you deal with procurement, we dealt with by turning things into very simple processes. So we created an intake process that if people want to use technology, rather than coming to us with a solution, they have to come to us with a problem in plain English before they even talk to the procurement people. And it's starting to make a huge difference. But we can talk about that offline. But again, Terry, leadership is something that is far more interesting and exciting when we do it together because no one has all the answers. And it's just amazing to me how much I learn every day talking to my colleagues here.
Well, let me add to that, Mike. I think that we've all said that there's only 50 of us. And so we really are kind of, certainly when I say we, because when I was in the job, that's kind of the way that I looked at it. And it is just a great opportunity, as you say, to support each other, particularly as we walk into these leadership challenges in terms of, how do we address this with our governor's offices? And, how are we really looking at this as an opportunity? So, Amanda, let me turn it over to you. I mean, you've got certainly your set of challenges in Texas with a very sort of decentralized approach with your agency. So how are you seeing this? I mean, you kind of walked into this job not long ago either. You sort of stepped in and had to take a role. And I know you have a number of different initiatives on the books with your budget. So what are some of the things that you're seeing in terms of being able to build your relationships?
Absolutely. Hi, Terry. And I do want to circle back with what Mike said. And is it Sean? Do you prefer Sean or Shanzi? Anyway, welcome.
Thank you. Either one is fine.
Okay. I'm Amanda or Mandy. I'm the same way, but I do want to echo what Mike said. They've been, the community has been really supportive of me. So don't hesitate to reach out at all, even if it's just to vent. That's totally fine. But yeah, as far as priorities, I mean, I think kind of just building on what others have said, we're at least here seeing the evolution of rather than blaming IT to seeking out the help of IT. and really wanting to involve us, which is fantastic. I think that's the goal that we've all certainly been focusing on. We know the pandemic really highlighted the need to have the capabilities, whether it's through digital services or just to be able to have that scalability, to be able to continue doing our jobs no matter where we were. So I think the business side and state leadership certainly saw the value in that, which is rewarding. But now to me, the key coming forward and what we have to look at as a community is that sustainability of being able to deliver as our customer agencies are wanting and demanding more and more from us. And frankly, it was not something that we would necessarily, at least where I was sitting, have predicted that business would be booming as much as it is for us. And so that's where it really comes with having these great relationships with the industry, and having those partnerships has really paid off for us, because we've been able to fill, whether it's gaps in our workforce or in services by reaching out. So I really commend my team, who was here long before I was, and had this vision to build this more of this outsource model, knowing that we had limited people to be able to do this, because it's really paid off, I think, in having those strong industry partnerships. So we're just going to keep plugging away and making sure we all don't kind of burn out with all the work. So that's one of the challenges we're seeing.
Great. Well, I'm going to go to Todd and then to Heather. So Todd, let me turn it to you and let me ask you a little bit different take on this. With IT, the good news is IT's been out there in the forefront. But unfortunately, there are some CIOs that are getting the blame, if you will, for not having modernized infrastructure. So, what are you seeing out there in terms of how CIOs are dealing with this? And what are some things they should be thinking about as they think about that modernization?
So I work for HP, and our CIO is a gentleman named Ron Guria, who was the past CIO of state of Illinois. And what I would tell you is that, and I'll give you from Todd's perspective as an employee of HP, has been that we do an annual survey of all of our employees. And, I'm proud to say that we get generally around 99% of almost 60,000 people that provide feedback. And by far, over the last 10 years, the single biggest subject that gets the most attention is tools and processes are not sufficient for people to do their job, by far. And, one of the things that's been refreshing that Ron's done almost in the year that he's been here is that in the past, the CIO's office used to rely upon their staffs to be the conduit with regards to how they got information. And what Ron has done a really nice job on is two things. Is he's taken that hard shell off the CIO and brought the ropes all the way down to the ground in terms of engaging with two sets of folks. The folks that are actually doing the work and experiencing how they're doing the work, going to call center, sitting down, seeing how these tools work, understanding the level of frustration. And then as unique, going out and talking to customers and experiencing how their tools and processes engage with ours and what the impact of that is. So back to basics a little bit with doing that. The other thing that's taken that shell off from a CIO perspective is that Ron has taken the mantle on leading HP's diversity and inclusion across the company. So it's outside of the IT role, and I would say that it's turned the CIO's role at HP from less of a tools and process to a business engagement leadership, and it's changed everyone's perspective in terms of how IT and the rest of the organization work together. So, and I think having that experience and working in state government and constituents has really bridged the gap for a commercial company like HP.
Well, Todd, what's so cool about what you're saying, and Jennifer's smiling too. It's
I
like,
was
we'd
gonna say,
love
can
to
I
see a
weigh
state
in?
CIO make good,
I'm gonna say, I love to hear this. Love Ron. We miss Ron, and what you're describing is something, and I'm sure he's already ingraining this throughout HP. But exactly what you just described, Genchi Genbutsu, go look, go see. Ron is all about that, and it's exactly what you're describing and really.
We love to
getting
know,
out
right,
there,
guys? There's a life
understanding.
after.
Mhm. Yeah, you're very lucky.
Thank you.
Heather, let me go to you, and then Jason Clark, I'm going to go to you right after that. So Heather, let me ask you that kind of same question, how are CIOs, and Jennifer talked about this really as it relates to just transparency, but how are you seeing CIOs and IT leadership, really manage the expectation that we can't fix the ills of 20 years overnight?
I know. Yeah, no, you're spot on, Tara. And again, I just want to say thank you to all the government leaders who are leading this change every day. I mean, you all deserve so many accolades working in such a volatile environment recently. I mean, it's always been there, but even more so that we know now. And, it breaks my heart when I hear about, Shanzia, when you mentioned about, kind of how things are in Georgia getting blamed, right? Because IT truly is the unsung heroes in many cases. And there's so much that's going right. It's easy for folks to point out maybe what's not going right. And so we got to change that. But I think from an industry lens, just something to kind of think about as I think about my perspective at Adobe is that what we're seeing really, and again, it just kudos to the group. CIOs are really working with their partner community and, coming together to look for ways to digitize business processes, try to find ways to take paper out of the equation, which is so important, and provide an easier way of working together, both kind of within the walls of government and then obviously external facing out to citizens as well. Mike, I think you hit upon it earlier, and it's always, you have to do that in a very secure way to make sure that everyone knows that their information is being protected. So I think, we've been seeing the government get a lot of value, for example, like just out of electronic signatures. Like I'll just use one easy example of kind of how to digitize workflows to keep those processes running. We shouldn't require people to have to go to an office to kind of get a signature to kind of keep something going through. So using technology to get those approvals in minutes, not weeks or longer, is really a great opportunity to see some efficiency. So seeing IT embrace these opportunities and help agencies and citizens with these types of solutions has really been exciting, not only as a citizen, obviously, but just from our vantage point as well. So just a couple of food for thought. I guess the recommendation or the thought is, stay focused on digitizing those processes.
Outstanding. Well, thanks, Heather. Well, Jason, I'm going to turn to you and then I'm going to go to Aparna. But Jason, you're fairly new, although you've been in the state, you've been at Delaware for a while, but you're fairly new in this CIO role. So how have you seen some of your leadership challenges? I know that the governor really, after you came in or just before you came in, was talking about, greater consolidation in Delaware and some changes for the IT organization. How's that playing out for you post-pandemic, or at least hopefully post-pandemic?
Yeah, I think well, thanks for letting me speak on it. And good afternoon, everyone. I would say the themes are really probably the same that we've heard across the board here. There is a true appreciation or more appreciation for the services that are supplied from the IT department here. And I will say that Mike, my neighbor, surrounding neighbor, alluded to the rate of bureaucracy and kind of the speed at which it happens. I'll say the rate of change for the appreciation far exceeds the role or the ability to reorganize to deliver on that change, right? So that's one of the things that we're focused on. I think Tony touched on it when he talked about putting people first and really setting ourselves up to be successful in delivering those things. And so that's one of the focus areas for us now as we go through this change, because we have put ourselves out there. People have seen what they can achieve, and we can kind of broker and build that bridge to so much of what they want to do. But that generates more and more phone calls. I mean, I received some calls today from groups that we've never really worked with, and they're just kind of stuck, and they want help, and they say, I heard you can do this. That's great. It's just that, we have a process and we need people and we need enough to continue that forward. So it's great to be able to put ourselves out there and to make that happen. It is a little double-edged sword that some people have alluded to in being able to deliver. I will say as well, I think you touched on how do you talk about what's transpiring. And so and the notion of technology being blamed or along those lines, being stuck with whatever legacy environment exists. We would like to refer to that as some of the technology debt we have in the state. And I think the big key for us is telling the story. And you got to be good at that. I think your first guest, I think her success is pretty clear, just the way she was able to communicate with us. That's a key piece. I bring it up from time to time, and just in the context of email. 15 years ago in the state, we transitioned to one solution. We've been there for quite a while, so that's like a big milestone point. But we only had maybe a third of the workforce utilizing email. Now the entire workforce utilizes email. 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we weren't worried about phishing and all these other things. Now we have whole programs around education and keeping people up to speed. We have large file transport. We have all these things that just grew out of a simple service. And yet, we got to expand and grow with that as well. And finally, I guess I'll touch on the fact around that storytelling and being able to address that technical debt and other pieces is leveraging the momentum of what we have going on today. So cybersecurity being a hot topic. I mean, you can't go a day without a ransomware or whatever it may be, but you got to figure out how to leverage those catastrophes or those tragedies and showcase that this represents a risk that we have as well, or that we need to address, and utilize that momentum of the time to push forward on any topic that you have in front of you.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, Aparna, I'm going to turn to you and get your view in terms of what are some of the things that you're working on. And one of the things that I'm also interested in, I'm going to go to Michelle next and then to Mark. How are you having to make changes from your strategic plan perspective last year to this year that takes advantage of this newfound place that you have in the organization? So Aparna, let me start with you and then I'll go to Michelle.
Sure. Thank you, Terry, for the opportunity, and nice meeting you all virtually. I'm going to speak on behalf of my CTO, and the way we have really transformed things here in New Jersey, state of New Jersey, is very first thing was getting everybody to work remotely, and which we were not prepared for. And I think everyone was just kind of lifting and shifting, trying to figure out if employees didn't have state issued equipment, and if they were to bring personal devices, keeping cybersecurity posture in mind. And as Jason alluded, like about the phishing emails, spam emails, that was just kind of increasing. And we had to really figure out a way in kind of keeping it at bay. So our partners, which are actually part of NJKIC, they do an excellent job here in keeping those emails hitting our inboxes, but some do slip and they make it into our inbox. And the next thing was for us to modernize our mainframe. Everyone has that system, that environment, and that is a challenge. So we did take mainframe into cloud, and thanks to Chris Ryan and Roger Gibson for their leadership and support in transforming that into cloud. And now the next step is modernizing the applications. So yes, the strategic plan did change drastically based on the needs, and not just the needs of the users, but consumers and all the stakeholders across the executive branch and beyond that. So it was a lot of change where IT was seen as a core part of the business, and understanding the value and understanding the outcomes that we can produce with the partnership, of course. And this partnership is not just within, but outside with our suppliers and our vendors, right? So it was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah. Michelle, let me just turn to you. What are some of the things that you're seeing out there as you work, with any number of states?
Oh, just a super quick background. I'm a new arrival to Verizon, and what I do here is I lead our public sector strategy. So a lot of what I'm thinking about is how is Verizon helping you as CIOs tackle those challenges that are coming your way. But I spent my last 20 years before coming here working with public sector leaders on major technology transformations, most recently at McKinsey, where we did work with a number of the states on thinking this through. And I it's just been tremendous to see what the CIO organizations have had to deal with over the last year. And a lot of it, it's the leadership was trying to take all of the respective states and the organizations along this digital transformation path for a long time. And then now we've accelerated it, right? And as you can see, just brought into the center of the conversation as, really acknowledging the mission critical role that each of you play. But I think it's only going to get more complicated, right? Sean touched on the Senate bill that just passed and broadband. Well, broadband is one part of it, thinking about really being in the solution around digital inclusion and closing that digital divide, as well as we start to see the flow of data across our critical infrastructures, the role that the CIO needs to play in, ensuring that as we make our infrastructure smarter, that we don't put it at risk of being dumber than it was before we began, with all the different risks that are out there, and so includes thinking about, how do you make sure that your systems has power? How do you make sure that it can operate, even if there's an attack and you're cut off from the rest of the world? How do you keep the mission critical pieces going? It's only going to get more and more complicated and more important, the role that each of you play in doing that.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. Well, Mark, let me turn to you in Washington. You got a lot of stuff going on. And then Cindy, I want to turn to West Virginia because you've had some organization changes that have just happened too. So Mark, let me start with you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Again, Mark Quimby, Deputy Director of Technology and Operations at Washington in our Central Service IT agency. So I was picking up on the strategic plan changes and what that's done for us around the last year and a half or so. And from a technology, from a capability, I would say it hasn't really changed our plans, but certainly, as was just mentioned, an accelerator on different initiatives to get them moving faster. And in a lot of ways, removing some roadblocks that we were running into from an authorizing environment, from a embracing from our federated agencies and priorities of different things like cloud adoption or endpoint protection and simple things that are out there. We've come a long ways, but that understanding and then also the citizen engagement needs through all these remote capabilities, instead of, I'm going to go visit an office and stand in line for 4 hours and then get seen, and really changing that dynamic and that understanding of how to serve the citizens in a remote manner. The power and the need for integrating these systems and having platforms that share data and having an actual state identity management strategy and capability. And so it's been an accelerator in adopting a lot of the same foundational understanding of where we need to move and where we've been espousing for some time, but have run against multiple roadblocks. Still have funding roadblocks, but at least we have more energy of people pushing on that rock to get it over the hill. But for things, again, from identity management, lots and lots of security movement last year and a half, and needs and capabilities and actually movement as well. But then also the capabilities of the cloud. I look at our departments and our services that were already in cloud environments, and the capabilities they were having to quickly scale. Hey, this is up 5,000%, this is up 10,000%, whatever the case is for the unprecedented needs. And those that were in those environments were able to meet citizens' needs without too much of a blip. But others, hold on-prem this or that, and these things that we've been pushing for some time, they started to realize the why in some of those. And so that's helping to create a little bit of energy and movement in that direction. We also have a brand new state CIO of 2 weeks, so going through some of those transitions as well, and it's going well. And very thankful for somebody who's been in the state for many years in different capacities, and is coming back from LA County. So Bill Kehoe is our state CIO, and so he's a wonderful foundation to help move us forward further. So
that's great. Well, Cindy, I'm going to let you have the last word here. What's going on in West Virginia? I know that Josh is taking on a more, kind of a broader role.
Right. The legislature this last session did change the role, which was traditionally Chief Technology Officer, to the Chief Information Officer, which does have that expanded, a little bit more broader view of what technology is. and kind of talking about the pandemic and what that approach was. We too have had those instances where we were the good guy, then we were the bad guy. And it seems like something goes wrong, we're always the bad guy. But I think that what happened during the pandemic is, and I think it's been echoed here quite often in different ways, is people realizing the importance and the significance of what the technology office role is in the state and how much we are there and how much they actually do depend on us, that we're not just the fall guy, that we are the one that makes it happen for them. And so I think, was able to step up to that role during the pandemic, and a lot of our folks are still remote, and we've been able to do that for our people. Kind of going back to that statement about thinking about your people and what is it that makes them motivated. Doing the remote, the telework policy and program that we've put in place recently has definitely been a motivator for our staff. They proved they could do it. They proved they could more than accomplish what needed to be done during the pandemic remotely. So we carried that on through, and it's been a game changer. It's been a great hit. It's been wonderful, and we're seeing our productivity through our staff. And so keeping staff and keeping that that people aspect of it is definitely important. But something that we definitely are seeing, and there's a couple of other aspects to this that was proven through that legislative change, is having the executive support, which I believe, and we're seeing a lot of that. I think one example of that, not only the legislation, but we're seeing that in the ARPA funding and the discussions. We are one of those that the technology office was like the last one to know when an agency was going to have a project or they had this big technology initiative that they wanted to put forward. We were the last one. So when we would raise questions and things that would, that obviously were going to be a challenge to get done, we were seen as, the obstacle. And that's not true. That's not at all what we were trying to play there. So if we can switch that around to where we are able to see from the front end and get engaged in those discussions, like Michael was saying, get engaged at the beginning so that we can kind of come up and help the agency come up with a solution rather than being the one saying, yeah, that's not going to work. That's definitely a positive. But what we are challenged with now is the communication aspect. We have put in place we call it ITAC, it's Information Technology Advisory Council, which is all of our agency heads, our department heads. So the challenge we're seeing there, it's a great opportunity for communication to get their feedback, but for us to also push what we need done out. But the communication aspect, we're still really having a lot of challenges with that, because even though we're great in that group, getting it to trickle down, we're still getting a little bit of challenges there. But that's a key thing, communication. And you guys, constant. You can't just say, okay, we did it. No, you got to keep it going. So those are some of the things that challenges, highlights from what we're seeing.
Well, that's great, Cindy. Well, really appreciate it. Well, thanks everybody for being a part of my breakout group. We're starting to see everybody come back from their breakout sessions. So as they're coming back, Tony, I'm going to turn to you. You opened up our session for us, which I really appreciate. But you're now in the process of developing your strategic plan, or at least, you have developed your strategic plan over the past few weeks. What are some things that maybe came up in that plan that you had not necessarily anticipated you were going to put in the plan when you started it?
So we have a process here called Plan to Procure, PTP. What that Plan to Procure does is actually match our budget to proposed technology initiatives. Having done strategic plans for years and taught strategic planning, never associated the plan with a true budget because it's so far out in most instances. But we had a drill with the team, and we actually used the New York PTP policy to supplement our strategic plan. And we added in a technology roadmap, which gave us a 1, 3, and 5-year view of where we were going to go, what we proposed to do in the short term as well. And I call it the tactical term, if you will, as well as the strategic term out past 5 years. So what we had to do was line those up together. And I found it to be a great drill. I was inspired by my boss, the Deputy Secretary for Government and Technology, to put this together. And it gives us, if you will, a great reference document for future planning with regards to purchases and customer support. So now we know what we want. Of course, the emphasis is always on security nowadays, but how we match that security to our budget, to planned technologies that we want to put in place, short-term and long-term. The approach, though, was getting the team to understand the vision. And I wrote the vision statement and we worked from there. So it worked out pretty well.
Great. Well, thanks, Tony. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your breakout sessions. And thank you to my moderators, Phil and Steve and Alan, for being there to support the group. All right. Now, before we start our CIO roundtable, I want to tell you about our best practices guide for 2021. It was sent to all of the CIOs that are in the group, as well as our technology partners. The guide was developed from our last digital state survey, and it's been updated for all the great work that you've done since then. So we have put a link to that in the chat. But again, take a look, and if there's anything there that you're particularly interested in, let us know. All right, now let's go on to our CIO roundtable. For this portion of the agenda, please again use the virtual hand raise as you did in your breakout sessions. And we're going to call on you, and remember to unmute yourself as soon as we do. So for the next 30 minutes, we really want to get your thoughts and ideas on how your leadership style has changed. And we want to really take that, really starting from what Renee was talking about. And so I want to just ask the group, what are some things that you heard from Renee that particularly resonated with you? And how are you changing as you work with your team remotely? So I want to start with a couple of folks and going to call on you. And then after that, I just really want to hear from the whole group. So Mark, Mark Raymond, let me start with you. What did you hear from Renee's conversation that really resonated with you?
Well, I think the concepts of managing risk is we're in the process of transitioning to a very centralized and consolidated IT model, and that the discussion around balancing risk, it really resonates with where we are right now and in our discussion with the agencies, right, where they see a loss of control on their side as the only vector, and what we're talking to them about, what is the risk that you have today, because the risks of falling behind, the risks of not meeting expectations, if they were to stay as we're all currently organized, is something that they don't think a lot about. So that part of it for me, it's not just technical risk, but the overall risk of not grasping this time to change has been a part of what I've developed in my leadership style has changed in the last year by going through this process in a really fundamental way. So I'd say from that, that was one of the things that really resonated with me, Terry.
Great. Well, thanks, Mark. Stephanie Dedman, let me ask you, what did you take away from the conversation with Renee?
Yes, I took a couple of things away from that aren't really related to the pandemic necessarily, or what how leadership might have changed for us, but a couple of things that really struck me. She said when she came and inherited the team, she had to do what she could to learn from them, to understand what she could get from them, and then figure out how best to support them. And hopefully I captured that close to the way she said that. But I thought those were three key things that really we do every day, or we should do every day. And then the second thing she said is really leading with humility. And I just think that is so important in everything that we do. It's actually when I interview someone, certainly at the at my direct report level, I always say there is absolutely no room for ego in my organization. And so if you think you have a healthy one, this might not be the place for you. And so I really like the way she said those two things. The only thing I'll add about how leadership has changed, on where we are today, I think I just have to work very hard to make sure I make myself more available than we used to. You could walk around, you could you could go before a meeting, stay after a meeting. And so you just have to work extra hard to figure out those ways to put yourself out there for your team.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Stephanie. Well, let me just ask for other, observations of anyone in the group. Hit your raised hand button and, let's get some other views. Dennis, turn to you.
Well, I wanted to comment that I would work for her in a second. Like I just looking at her and seeing how she operated, smart, tough, compassionate, getting the job done. That's somebody I could work for or with.
Thanks. Thanks, Dennis. I appreciate that. What did she, I mean, she had a little bit different communication style, in terms of the way that she presented. Was there anything about that, one of the things that we're all challenged with is we got to be out there, which sometimes we like to be and sometimes we don't. Anything particularly about her style or, the way that she was communicating that really struck you?
Well, I think that even though you could tell she's extremely intelligent and driven, the humility came through. She didn't just say it, you can tell that's in there. And so, that was fun. And, and the comment on the look, you definitely know you wouldn't want that look. So that was pretty funny. I got a kick with that. I have a look apparently too, so I've been told. So
your folks could relate to that.
Yeah. It's more of an ironic look, not the are you really telling me this right now? Look, but super fun, and you did a great job choosing somebody to speak to us. Thank you.
Great. Mike Leahy, I'll turn to you, and then Michael Ertolda.
I just wanted to add to this that everything Dennis and Stephanie said is very true, but what jumped out at me was it's obvious she was really excited about what she was doing. And that's infectious. And I think, attitude covers a lot of our sins as we're learning things. If you're engaged and excited about the work and pushing your people to do well and, rewarding them and acknowledging them when they do makes a huge difference.
Great observation. Michael, I'm going to turn to you.
I mean, it's not rocket science. But maybe it is. She normalized it and made it seem very easy to understand, but I love her being a part of leadership and including, as we see in education, STEM, STEAM with diversity added in and the arts, and being a leader in that with women in STEM, which we find in the education sector, especially in K-12. So I heard her, this is the second time, Terry, but I got more out of it this time. She was engaging and I really enjoyed it.
Oh, great. Fantastic. Well, I think I certainly would add to that. I think that element of humility comes through as she's talking. And you could certainly see, as you have all said, how she engages. Tony, what did you think of that conversation?
I think that she demonstrated what I found to be important as I shift my leadership style. I used to be very interested in being the technical person and understanding technology at the user level, at the technician level. But as I've grown and I'm now responsible for communicating with my peers, it's more important to make my words digestible and understandable so that I can be more conversant and get the point over to someone who may not understand. We even have a mission tonight to talk about a particular technology that we're using within the state. It needs to be translated into plain English as opposed to transposed into a technology brief. And I think my leadership style has changed there. I'm a little more humble. I saw her humility in terms of being able to communicate and get the message across effectively using plain English. And that's what I saw, and I was impressed.
Well, thanks, Tony. I think that, that's a great comment from you. I think sometimes we as leaders don't necessarily express how we've evolved and how we've changed. So thanks for sharing that. It's really, really a great observation. Let me just ask about other comments. Any thoughts on, kind of her cybersecurity program, the way she looked at cybersecurity, some of the things, clearly it was daunting, to really go in and say, all right, now you have to kind of look at what cybersecurity is across NASA. So any observations from that, or, things that you'll be able to take away, as you go back into your roles and responsibilities? Any thoughts on that? Steve, I'll turn to you.
All right. I mean, this is going to sound really trivial, but the state CIOs will know what I'm talking about. I mean, every year we go to the mid-year and, beat on our federal partners about rationalization and everyone getting on NIST. And so to hear that NASA was actually using NIST 800-53, all my agency customers that struggle with the complexity, I mean, it's a double-edged sword to tell them NASA's using it because, it's like rocket science. But the fact that NASA is actually eating the fed dog food was really, I loved hearing that.
Well, that was a great question. I think that actually Mike asked, or someone asked about NIST. And clearly, as you say, that's something you can go back in and say, well, hey, the space guys are doing it, so we all should be doing it. Great comments, Steve. Thanks. Any other comments just about overall, what the plan was or what anyone said? Dennis, back to you.
Well, I was just thinking, we have, I know there's going to be some House members in New Hampshire introducing some supply chain legislation, IT supply chain. So when hearing her speak about that, I'm like, wow, that's some great input. I'm going to have to absorb some of that and try to influence what's going on in New Hampshire, because it's a pretty complex subject. But I suspect nowhere is it more complex than in NASA. So if they can do it, I guess we can begin to chip away at it at the state level.
Great. Chris, over to you.
One of the comments she made that stuck with me was that she had to bring cybersecurity even into outer space. I was like, wow, okay, how do you do that? And it reminded me that as with the pandemic and technologies pushing the boundary of our reach, and we have to be constantly looking at what are the new boundaries that we are now expected to fulfill our role in.
No, that's fantastic. I think that you're right. Even though she was talking about space, I think all of you are faced with thinking about, your citizen privacy. You're looking at critical infrastructure now, clearly post the Colonial Pipeline. You're being asked to look at, how the state can actually help with so many different things than perhaps what you faced before. All right. Well, I got time for one more comment. Does anybody have another comment before we move into our fun section where Phil's got some really great fun for all of us? Anybody that's got a closing comment? All right. Well, before we go to the fun, we are going to do a group photo. So I need everybody to turn on their cameras. No, Steve, you turned your camera off. We're going to be turning our cameras on. And I'll give everybody a minute to do that. And then Lisa's going to take our picture. So I need everybody to smile and hang on to that smile for about 30 seconds. So everybody smile. And Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you to take the picture.
Okay, I got it.
All right, fantastic. Okay, well, now comes the fun part. Clearly, we had a chance to exchange ideas and talk about what's going next. But Phil, as our resident Las Vegas game guy, I am now going to turn it over to you.
Hey, can everybody see my eRepublic mouse pad? And do you have your dice ready? So what we're going to do is we're going to play CIO Yahtzee. So here's how we're going to do it. What we're going to do is you're going to take your dice and you're going to try to get as many of a like number as you can. So you're going to roll your dice out on your pad, and then you'll keep the numbers that are like, and you'll get 3 rolls. And what your goal is to try to get 5 of the same number, as I'm doing right here, try to get 5 of the same number. So see, I got 4. So everybody get your dice, go ahead and try to do the best you can. And I'm going to go ahead and get my video back on here, and we'll make it work.
How many rolls do we get?
You get 3.
And we're trying to get the highest matches.
Yeah, you want to get as many matches as you can. So your goal is to get 5 of a kind if you can.
Just in one singular roll, right?
Nope, 3 rolls. So you roll
rolls.
once, you keep the same numbers, and then you'll roll again to try to get more of the same number, and roll one more time to try to get 5 of a kind. So, all right, everybody go ahead and do your rolling. All right, so what I need you to do, and this is where we're going to use the virtual hand raise. Everybody who got 5 of a kind, do the virtual hand raise for me. If you got 5 of a kind, everybody put on your virtual hand raise.
Hey, Steve, can I use, Phil, can I use the Joker for one of the dice as a wild card, maybe?
Did you only have 4 dice?
I got 5 dice, but I only had 4 of a kind. So I want to.
Oh, so that's okay, because no one's raising their hand right now. I don't see anybody who's got 5 of a kind. Did anybody get 5 of a kind? All right, that means everybody who got 4 of a kind, put up your virtual hand raise. So everybody that got 4 of a kind, okay, here we go. Now everybody's starting to come in. Well, we thought we'd put a little gambling in to this event. So here we go. All right, so those 4 of a kind, I have Stephanie, Tommy, Dennis, Kurt, Morgan, Tamara, Hemant. Is that it for 4 of a kind?
What about Terry? Did Terry roll? You got to give her a chance.
No, we're not eligible. We're not eligible here.
Plus, anyway, Tommy, I didn't have enough.
And by the way, so Tommy, I hate to tell you this, but our private sector partners, you just get to like be the champion of the private sector partners. We're the public sector, there's actually a $20 gift card.
Oh.
So everybody go ahead and roll again. So you're going to do 3 more rolls. You're going to go ahead and roll again and roll one more time. And the goal is to go ahead and get 5 of a kind if you can.
So this is rolling not the 1 dice that didn't match, but rolling all 5
roll
again.
it all over again. Do it all over again. Okay.
Oh, rework.
Yes. So it appears that for my private sector folks, I have Tommy and I have, let's see, Morgan is out there. Who else is my private sector? Just wave your hand at me. I have Tommy and Morgan. All right. And the Tamara, did you get 4 of a kind earlier? You did. So you did. So now, did anybody get 5 of a kind? Raise your hand if you raise your hand physically if you got 5 of a kind. No. Well, we did. Craig, did you get 5 of a kind? This was only for the.
But is this for only people that advanced the first time?
Yes. So only the people that advanced were to roll again.
I get pride then.
There you go. Well done.
Pride, not prize.
All right. So Tommy or Morgan, did either of you get 4 of a kind?
On me.
Morgan, you're the champion on the partner side. Well done. So you guys can put your hands down. So between Dennis, Kurt, Hemant, and Stephanie, did anybody get 4 of a kind? Did anybody get 3 of a kind?
I got 4.
Oh, wait.
Kurt got 4.
I got 4 ones. And Hemant, did you get 5 of a kind?
No, I got 4 ones.
Okay. Hemant, what did you get? Sorry, you're on mute. So go ahead and unmute yourself.
No, I got 3, not 4.
Okay. Our winner is Kurt Wood. Congratulations. You got 4 1s. And congratulations on CIO Yahtzee. Now tomorrow, make sure you have a deck of cards. You have the deck of cards we sent you or your own deck of cards. We're going to play a fun game again tomorrow. So Terry, it is back to you.
Hey, Phil, thanks. Well, that was just really so much fun, and I really appreciate your doing that. All right, well, it's time to wrap up for today. I certainly hope that you've had as much fun as we've had, and that you had the opportunity in the breakout groups and really in the roundtable to share thoughts and ideas and kind of what's happening out there. Our keynote clearly, from all of our conversation, Renee really hit a lot of hot buttons that all of us are thinking about. And again, in the breakout groups, the conversations were exceptional. And I really hope that all of you enjoyed each other's company, and also that maybe you got to meet some folks, because there's been so much change in the CIO ranks that hopefully you got to meet some folks that maybe you hadn't had the opportunity before. And now, clearly we're going to be back again tomorrow. So before you go, here's our agenda. We're going to have our keynote speakers tomorrow, our own Dustin Heisler and Joe Morris. And they're really going to be talking about where technology is going. And that's clearly something I think that everybody's going to want to take a look at. And then we're going to talk about how does that really relate to what you're doing and what you're planning, again, in your strategic plan. Now, of course, we want to thank our sponsors: Accenture, Adobe, AWS, EasyVote Solutions, HP Incorporated, McAfee Enterprise, NIC, SHI International Corp, Verizon, and Yline. So thanks everybody so much for being here today. It was a great conversation. We're looking forward to having you back again tomorrow. And so again, have a great rest of your day. We'll see you all tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.